Welcome to the Principal Podcast. You know, I have a great doctor. And one of the reasons I love my doctor is that she really focuses on prevention rather than just waiting till things get bad and then trying to fix it. So I was in the doctor's office some time ago and she said, you know what? You're overweight and you need to get on an exercise program and you need to start eating differently. I don't want to see you get type 2 diabetes. I don't want to see you have heart problems. And you're at the age where these things could pop up if you don't do something differently. Now, I super appreciated that feedback. I appreciated the fact that she was willing to be honest enough and say, hey, I mean, she even said, she said, you're borderline obese. You're pretty broad. So you may not quite be there, but you're right at the height and weight where you're right on the border and you need to fix it. And even though it was a little hard to hear, I was grateful to hear it because I needed to change something. Now, how many times in our marriages, in our families, are we being preventative? In other words, if we have this idea that I work on things when they're not a big crisis, sometimes people, they live in this crisis mode where they wait till things get bad and then they deal with the crisis. And I'm saying the best time to work on your marriage, the best time to work on your kids, when I say work on, I mean like raise your kids, is before there's a crisis, when the crisis isn't there. And I think that the way that we do that is to realize that by focusing on the now, doing what we can today. Remember, the little things are the big things. So doing little tiny things like, what can I do to make my marriage better today? And maybe that means I just walk in, and offer to give my wife a foot rub for 10 minutes because my marriage is worth trillions of dollars. 10 minutes. I mean, I should be taking care of that much more than I should be taking care of my career. I should be taking care of that much more than anything else in my life. So it's my wife, it's my marriage, right? So a little 10-minute foot rub or a simple compliment or a text where you're doing the things. Now, one of the things I've talked about Tamara Fackrell, I'm going to give her credit for this, but she says one of the things you've got to remember then is that in good marriages, there's 5-to-1 positives. And this came from John Gottman's research that you need to have 5 positives for every 1 negative. Well, you can't control what your spouse is going to do, but you control what you're going to do. And if you say, you know what, I'm going to put 5 positives in, even if I don't feel like it, I'm going to 5 compliments or 5, I'm going to do a little service here or a little something nice here or a text message that's a kind one or flirtatious or whatever it is. Do something to build that. Now, the other option is to let things go as they are. And then eventually, if they're on a bad track, they'll eventually crash. And then you have this big crisis. And like my doctor, why not deal with it when you're still basically healthy, but you need to lose some weight and still, instead of waiting until you have type 2 diabetes or some sort of heart problem or some kind of chronic health problem that you could have prevented if you would have taken just a little time to do a little exercise and to eat right, and to drink more water, whatever it is you need to do. And I think if we can take that approach, I wish so many people in our society today are convinced, or they act like we just need the next quick fix. I mean, you see it everywhere. You see, let me give you an example. There's this thought that if you having a bad day or having something, a lot of times, in my opinion, people overprescribe medication for everything. There should be a pill for everything and make you feel better right now. And I think people are not taking the long-term hard way, which is the really good way, just trying to go for the quick fix. So my point today is to stay away from the quick fixes. Keep this in mind when you're building. Here's a quote. I believe it's from Josiah Gilbert Holland. It said, "There's no royal road to anything. One thing at a time, all things in succession. That which grows fast withers as rapidly. That which grows slowly endures." So be willing to slow down and take the slow road. Stay away from the quick fixes. Generally, they don't work. In the long run, they lead to more frustration and problems. Don't try to fix your marriage, your family, your career with the next quick fix. Instead, focus on the slow game. The slow game really is that principle of the law of the harvest. You can't cram for it. It's a principle that's real. So you can If you plant your seeds and you water them and you fertilize the field and you weed and you do that the whole summer, in the fall you have a harvest. You can't cram, like we've talked about this before. Can you imagine a farmer putting the seeds in the last week in September and say, why do all the other farmers have seeds and I don't? Focus on the slow game. Do that with your marriage now. And the way you do that, try to focus on doing the positive things, just being positive, even if they're not being positive, at least 5-1, try to go 10-1 or 100-1, little compliments, little services, little surprises, little things that will, can make your marriage great. This is Zach saying, thanks for joining me for the Principal Podcast. Thank you so much for joining the Principal Podcast. I'm so glad that you listened and took the time. I'm on a mission to help as many marriages and families as I possibly can. I would love to hear from you. Things that keep you up at night, that concern you about your family, your marriage, and what things we could talk about on the Principal Podcast. If you like the podcast, please like, subscribe. You can check out my book on Amazon. It's called What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die. And again, thank you for supporting the podcast.